I was sitting on my porch in Scottsdale, Arizona, enjoying my morning coffee when I saw her marching across the street like a general heading into battle. Brenda Patterson, the HOA president, was clutching a clipboard to her chest, her face already pinched into that expression of righteous indignation that had become her trademark in our peaceful neighborhood of Desert Ridge Estates. I knew before she even opened her mouth that my quiet Saturday morning was about to be ruined. "Henry Richardson," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to discuss a serious violation." I set my coffee down and stood up, trying to maintain my composure. This was the third time in 2 months that Brenda had found some imaginary problem with my property. The woman had made it her personal mission to harass me ever since I had voted against her proposal to increase HOA fees by 30% at the last meeting. "Good morning, Brenda. What seems to be the problem?" She thrust her clipboard at me, pointing to what appeared to be several printed photographs of my house. "Your mailbox, Mr. Richardson. It's in clear violation of Section 7, subsection C of our HOA covenant. The shade of gray you painted it last month is not on the approved color palette." I stared at her in disbelief. "Brenda, I painted it the exact same color it was before. It needed a fresh coat because the paint was peeling. I even checked the records. It's been that color for 8 years. "Well, 8 years ago someone made a mistake," she snapped. "The approved gray is Sherwin-Williams Colonial Gray. What you have there is clearly Benjamin Moore Gray Owl. They're completely different. They look identical to me." "That's because you obviously lack the refined eye needed to spot such distinctions. I have a degree in interior design, Mr. Richardson. I know what I'm talking about." She flipped to another page on her clipboard. "And that's not all. Your front lawn was measured at 3.2 inches yesterday. The maximum allowed height is 3 inches exactly." I could feel my blood pressure rising. "You're telling me that 0.2 inches of grass is a violation? Are you serious right now? The rules exist for a reason. They maintain property values and neighborhood aesthetics. If we let one person slide, soon everyone will think they can do whatever they want." She pulled out a printed document and handed it to me. "This is your official notice of violation. You have 14 days to rectify these issues, or you'll face a fine of $200 per day per violation. That's $400 daily, Mr. Richardson. I suggest you take this seriously." "This is harassment, Brenda. You know it and I know it." Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, Mr. Richardson. Making accusations like that could be considered defamation. Perhaps you should think before you speak. I'd hate for this to escalate into legal action." "Legal action? Over a mailbox and 2/10 of an inch of grass? Over your persistent refusal to follow the rules everyone else manages to abide by just fine." She turned on her heel. 14 days, Mr. Richardson. The clock is ticking." I watched her march back across the street to her house, which was directly opposite mine. Of course it was. I couldn't escape her watchful eye even if I wanted to. I looked down at the violation notice in my hands, feeling a mixture of anger and exhaustion. This was getting out of control. My wife Sarah had passed away 2 years ago, and since then, my daughter Wendy had been checking in on me regularly. She lived in Phoenix, about 30 minutes away, and worked as an attorney at a prominent law firm specializing in civil litigation. I pulled out my phone and called her. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" Her voice was warm and immediately comforting. "Your favorite HOA president just paid me a visit. I've been hit with another violation notice." "You're kidding. What is it this time?" "My mailbox is apparently the wrong shade of gray and my grass is 0.2 inches too tall." There was a long pause. 0.2 inches. That's what I said. "Dad, this is the third incident in 2 months. Remember when she cited you for having your trash cans visible from the street for 15 minutes? And before that, the whole debacle about your garden gnome being too whimsical. I remember. I'm starting to think she just has it out for me. Starting to think, Dad, this is textbook harassment. And now she's threatening legal action over a mailbox and grass. That's absurd. I could hear papers rustling in the background. I'm coming over. Don't sign anything, don't pay anything, and definitely don't change anything yet. I want to look at all the documentation. She arrived an hour later, dressed casually in jeans and a blouse, her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Wendy had her mother's sharp features and my stubborn determination. She'd inherited the best parts of both of us, along with a brilliant legal mind that had made her one of the rising stars at her firm. "Show me everything," she said, setting her laptop bag down on my kitchen table. I handed her the violation notice along with the previous two from the past months. She read through them carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. Then she opened her laptop and started pulling up documents. "Dad, do you have copies of the HOA covenants and bylaws? They're in the filing cabinet in my office. I'll grab them." When I returned, she had already started typing notes. For the next 2 hours, we went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Wendy cross-referenced the alleged violations with the actual HOA rules, took measurements of my mailbox color with some kind of digital tool on her phone, and even went outside to measure my grass with a professional measuring device she had in her car. "Okay," she finally said, leaning back in her chair. "Here's what we've got. First, your mailbox color is well within the acceptable range according to the actual covenant language, which specifies a range of approved grays, not specific brand names. Brenda's interpretation is overly restrictive and not supported by the written rules. Second, your grass is actually 2.9 inches on average. I measured multiple spots. Even if it were 3.2 inches, the covenant allows for grass up to 3.5 inches before requiring maintenance. So she's just making things up, essentially, yes. But here's where it gets interesting." She turned her laptop screen toward me. I pulled the HOA meeting minutes from the past year. Brenda has issued 67 violation notices in the past 12 months. Want to guess how many other board members issued? How many? 15 total combined. And here's the kicker. Of those 67 notices Brenda issued, 43 were to homeowners who voted against her fee increase proposal. You're not the only one she's targeting, Dad. She's systematically harassing everyone who opposed her. Can she do that, legally? Absolutely not. She's abusing her position, selectively enforcing rules and engaging in what could be considered retaliatory harassment. The fact that she's threatening you with legal action is particularly problematic. Wendy's eyes had that gleam they got when she was onto something. "Dad, with your permission, I'd like to respond to this formally, not just to fight these violations, but to address the pattern of harassment. What exactly are you proposing? I want to send her a cease and desist letter first on behalf of my firm. If she backs off, great. If she doesn't, and especially if she follows through on her threat to take legal action against you, we countersue. Not just for harassment, but for abuse of authority, emotional distress, and potentially violations of fair housing practices if we can establish discrimination." I thought about it for a moment. Part of me just wanted to paint the stupid mailbox whatever color she wanted and be done with it. But another part of me, the part that Sarah had always encouraged, knew that sometimes you had to stand up to bullies. If Wendy was right and Brenda was doing this to dozens of homeowners, someone needed to stop her. "Let's do it," I said. Wendy spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a letter. She was thorough, citing specific statutes and case law, The letter detailed each false violation, pointed out Brenda's pattern of selective enforcement, and demanded that she cease all harassment immediately. It also requested that the HOA board convene an emergency meeting to address Brenda's conduct. "I'm going to have this couriered to her on Monday morning," Wendy said. "It'll arrive on official law firm letterhead. That tends to get people's attention." Monday came and went. Tuesday morning, I was in my garage organizing some tools when I heard tires screeching. I walked out to see Brenda's silver Lexus pulled haphazardly into my driveway, blocking me in. She got out, her face flushed red, waving papers in her hand. "How dare you?" she screamed, loud enough that several neighbors came out to see what was happening. "How dare you threaten me?" "I am doing my job, following the rules that everyone agreed to when they bought property here." "Brenda, calm down. I simply had my daughter review the violations you claimed I committed." Your daughter, she was practically spitting. I looked her up. "Wendy Anderson, some associate at Miller Crane. She thinks she can intimidate me with legal jargon. I've already consulted with my attorney, and he assures me that I am well within my rights as HOA president." "Then there shouldn't be a problem. If you're following the rules correctly, you have nothing to worry about." "This is defamation. You're attacking my character, questioning my authority. I could sue you for this." She thrust a finger at me. "I'm giving you one final warning, Mr. Richardson. Comply with the violations. Issue a formal written apology for this outrageous letter and we can put this behind us. Otherwise, you'll be hearing from my attorney, and trust me, he doesn't lose." I kept my voice level, remembering what Wendy had told me. "Brenda, I'm not going to apologize for asking that the rules be applied fairly and accurately. If you feel you need to involve your attorney, that's your right." "Fine." She threw the papers at my feet. "You want a fight? You've got one. I'm filing a lawsuit against you for harassment, defamation, and interfering with my duties as HOA president. When I'm done with you, you'll wish you just painted that mailbox." She stormed back to her car and peeled out of my driveway. I picked up the papers she'd thrown. They were copies of the letter Wendy had sent, covered in angry red pen marks and exclamation points. Several neighbors were still watching from their yards. Tom Henderson, who lived 2 doors down, walked over. "Henry, I don't know what that was about, but I've been wanting to tell you something. Brenda cited me last month for having a wreath on my door that was supposedly too large. I measured it against the covenant specifications. It was well within the limits. I was going to fight it, but my wife convinced me it wasn't worth the hassle. We just took the wreath down." "She's been doing this to a lot of people," I said. "My daughter's looking into it." "Good. Someone needs to stand up to her. She's turned this neighborhood into a nightmare. We can't even enjoy our homes anymore without worrying that she'll find some microscopic violation." Over the next few days, 3 more neighbors approached me with similar stories. Margaret Chen had been fined for wind chimes that were allegedly too loud, even though they'd been hanging in her backyard for 5 years without complaint. Robert Young had received a violation for parking his work truck in his own driveway overnight, despite the covenant allowing commercial vehicles as long as they didn't exceed certain size specifications, which his truck didn't. Linda Martinez had been threatened with daily fines because the flowers in her front garden were supposedly not drought-resistant enough, even though she provided documentation from her landscaper, proving they were all native Arizona plants. Every single one of them had voted against Brenda's fee increase. I documented everything and sent it to Wendy. She called me that evening, her voice tense. "Dad, this is bigger than I thought. I've started reaching out to some of these people directly. I've got statements from 8 homeowners so far who are willing to testify about Brenda's pattern of harassment. This isn't just about you anymore. We could potentially file a class action suit. That seems like a lot. Maybe we should just focus on my case. Maybe. But Dad, these people need help. Some of them have paid thousands in bogus fines because they were afraid of her threats. One couple, the Johnsons, are actually considering selling their house because they can't deal with her constant harassment. They love their home, but she's made their lives miserable. What do you think we should do? Let's see if she actually files this lawsuit she's threatening. If she does, we countersue and we do it hard. I'm talking not just on your behalf, but potentially bringing in other affected homeowners. We demonstrate a clear pattern of abuse of power and harassment. True to her word, Brenda filed her lawsuit 2 weeks later. I was served with papers claiming I had defamed her, caused her emotional distress, and interfered with her duties as HOA president. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. Wendy reviewed the filing in my living room, and I watched her expression shift from concern to something that looked almost like satisfaction. Dad, this is actually good news. How is being sued for $50,000 good news? Because her lawsuit is frivolous, and now we have grounds for a countersuit. She's made specific claims here that are demonstrably false. Plus, by filing this, she's opened herself up to discovery. That means we can subpoena all HOA records, all her communications, everything. She's basically handed us the keys to the kingdom. Wendy filed our response and countersuit 3 days before the deadline. Where Brenda's lawsuit had been 10 pages of vague accusations, our countersuit was 67 pages of meticulously documented harassment, abuse of authority, and violations of Arizona HOA regulations. We sued both Brenda personally and the HOA itself for failing to oversee her conduct. We also filed formal complaints with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA management. The countersuit included declarations from 12 homeowners detailing Brenda's pattern of harassment. We had photos, measurements, HOA records showing selective enforcement, and even email chains where Brenda had discussed targeting specific homeowners. Wendy had discovered that Margaret Chen, after receiving her violation notice, had filed a formal complaint with the HOA board. Brenda had never presented that complaint to the board. Instead, she'd responded personally, threatening Margaret with additional fines if she didn't withdraw the complaint. That's obstruction, Wendy explained. Homeowners have the right to appeal violations to the full board. By preventing that appeal from being heard, Brenda violated the HOA's own bylaws and Margaret's rights as a homeowner. The lawsuit demanded the removal of Brenda as HOA president, refunds for all improperly assessed fines, damages for emotional distress for all affected homeowners, and legal fees. The total came to just under $300,000. I was honestly shocked. Wendy, isn't this a bit much? Not even close, Dad. When you document everything, the numbers add up fast. And here's the thing, we're not actually trying to bankrupt anyone. We're trying to make a point. Brenda needs to be stopped, and the HOA needs to understand they can't let one person run wild with unchecked authority. The response from Brenda's attorney came faster than expected. He requested a meeting to discuss settlement before proceeding to formal discovery. Wendy agreed, and we met at her law firm's conference room the following Tuesday. Brenda arrived with her attorney, Marcus Webb, a tired-looking man in his 60s who seemed less than thrilled to be there. Brenda, on the other hand, looked like she was ready for war. She was wearing what could only be described as a power suit, her hair styled within an inch of its life, her makeup dramatic. "Let's get one thing clear," she started before anyone else could speak. "I am not going to be intimidated by frivolous countersuits and gangs of disgruntled homeowners who can't follow simple rules. Mrs. Patterson, Wendy said calmly, sliding folders across the table. These are copies of the evidence we'll be presenting if this goes to trial. I'd like you and Mr. Webb to review them. As they opened the folders, I watched Brenda's face shift from confident to confused to concerned. Wendy had organized everything chronologically, with tabs and highlights. There were the violation notices, cross-referenced with the actual covenant language showing they were baseless. There were statistics showing her selective enforcement. There were the declarations from other homeowners. And then there were the emails. Where did you get these? Brenda demanded, her voice rising. Discovery from the HOA's email server, with proper authorization from 2 board members who were concerned about your conduct. These are official HOA communications, which means they are subject to homeowner review under Arizona law. The emails were damning. In one exchange with another board member, Brenda had written, "We need to make examples of the people who voted against us. If we pressure them enough, they'll either fall in line or sell. Either way, we win." In another, she discussed specifically targeting my property because, in her words, Richardson thinks he's so smart with his public comments at meetings. Let's see how smart he feels when he's buried in violation notices. Marcus Webb was reading through everything with increasing concern. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to speak with you privately." "No," Brenda snapped. "Whatever you have to say, you can say here. I have nothing to hide." "Mrs. Patterson, these communications demonstrate intent. This isn't just overzealous rule enforcement. This is targeted harassment with documented premeditation. They're taking things out of context." "What context makes we need to make examples of the people who voted against us acceptable?" Wendy asked, her voice sharp. "What context justifies preventing a homeowner's appeal from reaching the board? What context explains why you've issued more violation notices in 1 year than the previous 3 HOA presidents combined issued in their entire terms?" Brenda's face was red. "I am maintaining standards. I am protecting property values. You're harassing people you have personal disagreements with, and you're using your position to do it. That's abuse of power, and it's illegal under Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1803. Wendy leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to court, and we're going to win. The evidence is overwhelming. You'll be removed as HOA president, you'll be liable for damages, and depending on how aggressive the judge feels, you might face additional penalties for violation of fair housing statutes." "This is ridiculous. I'll have both of you disbarred." "On what grounds?" Wendy asked calmly. "For representing my father's legitimate legal interests. For documenting your violations of Arizona HOA law. Please file that complaint." "I'd love to explain to the state bar exactly what you've been doing." Marcus Webb cleared his throat. "Miss Anderson, could I propose a 5-minute recess to consult with my client?" "Of course." They stepped out of the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Marcus talking urgently while Brenda gestured wildly, clearly arguing. This went on for more than 5 minutes. Finally, they came back in. Brenda looked furious but defeated. "My client is willing to discuss settlement terms," Marcus said. "I'm listening," Wendy replied. "Mrs. Patterson will agree to step down as HOA president, effective immediately. She will issue formal apologies to Mr. Richardson and any other homeowners who can provide documented evidence of improper violation notices. All pending violations against Mr. Richardson will be dismissed, and any fines already paid will be refunded." "That's a start, but not enough," Wendy said. "All violations issued by Mrs. Patterson in the past 12 months need to be reviewed by an independent third party. Any that are found to be improper need to be dismissed, and fines need to be refunded. Mrs. Patterson needs to be permanently barred from holding any position on the HOA board. The HOA needs to implement new oversight procedures to prevent this from happening again. And we want compensation for Mr. Richardson's emotional distress and legal fees. That's outrageous, Brenda burst out. You're trying to bankrupt me. No, I said, speaking for the first time. We're trying to make sure you never do this to anyone else. You made my life hell for months, Brenda. You did the same to a dozen other families. You abused your power because you couldn't handle people disagreeing with you. I was doing my job. Your job was to enforce the rules fairly and consistently. Instead, you weaponized them against people you had personal grudges against. That's not doing your job. That's being a bully. There was a long silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. Give us a number for the compensation. Wendy didn't hesitate. $25,000 for Mr. Richardson's emotional distress and legal fees. The HOA pays for the independent review of all violations, estimated at $15,000. Any refunds from that review come out of the HOA's general fund. Mrs. Patterson issues written apologies and agrees to all other terms. And just to be clear, if she violates any part of this agreement, she becomes liable for the full amount of our original countersuit. $15,000 for my fees, Marcus added. My client can pay that. Done, Wendy said. This is highway robbery, Brenda shouted. No, Mrs. Patterson, this is getting off easy, Wendy said coldly. If we go to trial, you're looking at potentially hundreds of thousands in damages, plus legal fees on both sides, plus the possibility of criminal charges for some of your conduct. The emails where you discussed manipulating HOA funds to pay for personal expenses. Those could be prosecuted as embezzlement. Take the settlement. Brenda looked like she wanted to flip the table, but Marcus put a hand on her arm. Mrs. Patterson, take the settlement. Fine, she spat. But I want it on record that this is coercion and that I'm only agreeing under duress. Noted, Wendy said, clearly not caring. My assistant will draft the settlement agreement. We'll reconvene in 3 days to sign. The settlement was finalized that Friday. Brenda showed up looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. She signed everything without speaking, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As part of the agreement, she had to read her written apology aloud. I, Brenda Patterson, apologize to Henry Richardson for improperly issuing violation notices that were not supported by the HOA covenants and bylaws. I acknowledge that my actions caused undue stress and were not in keeping with my duties as HOA president. I am resigning my position effective immediately and will refrain from seeking any board position in the future. Her voice was flat, robotic. When she finished, she stood up and left without another word. Marcus stayed behind to hand over the check and finalize some paperwork. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I tried to tell her months ago that this could blow up. She wouldn't listen. Some people can't help themselves. The independent review of Brenda's violations took 6 weeks. Out of the 67 violation notices she'd issued, 41 were found to be either completely baseless or improperly applied. The HOA ended up refunding nearly $70,000 in fines. Several homeowners who'd already paid their fines received checks in the mail, with formal apologies from the new interim HOA president. The HOA also implemented new rules requiring that any violation notice be reviewed and approved by at least 2 board members before being issued. And every homeowner received clear information about their right to appeal violations to the full board. A hotline was established for reporting concerns about board member conduct. 3 months after everything was settled, I was back on my porch enjoying my morning coffee when Tom Henderson walked over. "Henry, I wanted to thank you," he said. "I got a check for $1,200 yesterday. That was the fine I paid for the wreath violation. I never thought I'd see that money again. Thank Wendy, not me. She's the one who did all the heavy lifting. I planned to. But you're the one who stood up to Brenda when the rest of us were too scared or tired to fight. That takes courage." After he left, I thought about that. I hadn't felt particularly courageous. Mostly I'd felt tired and frustrated. But maybe that was what courage looked like sometimes. Not some grand, heroic gesture, but just the decision to say enough is enough. Wendy came over for dinner that Sunday, bringing Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. "How are you holding up, Dad?" she asked as we settled into the living room. "Good. Better than good, actually. It's nice to not have to worry about Brenda lurking across the street, waiting to pounce on some imaginary violation. She actually put her house on the market last week," Wendy said. "I saw the listing." "Really?" "Yeah. I think the shame of the whole thing finally got to her. The neighborhood knows what she did. Can't be easy living there with everyone knowing you abused your power and got caught. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. Don't. People like Brenda never learn unless they face real consequences, and even then, most of them just move on and find new victims." Wendy took a sip of wine. "But that's not your problem anymore." We talked about other things, lighter things. Wendy told me about a new case she was working on, something involving a contract dispute that was nowhere near as dramatic as our HOA saga. I told her about the vegetable garden I was planning for the spring. The conversation was easy, comfortable. "Your mom would be proud of you," I said eventually. "The way you handled all of this. You were brilliant. Mom would be proud of you too, Dad. For standing up for yourself and for the neighbors." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Wendy's phone buzzed. She looked at it and laughed. "What?" "Margaret Chen just sent me a photo." She rehung her wind chimes. "Big ones this time, apparently." I laughed too. Good for her. The new HOA board, elected in an emergency vote 2 weeks after Brenda's resignation, was a stark contrast to her reign. They were reasonable, responsive, and actually interested in serving the community rather than ruling it. The first thing they did was organize a neighborhood barbecue to rebuild community spirit after what they called the Patterson era. I went to that barbecue and found myself surrounded by grateful neighbors. Linda Martinez hugged me and introduced me to her husband. Robert Young shook my hand and told me he'd nominated me for the board, though I politely declined. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. The most surprising moment came when a young couple I'd never spoken to approached me. They'd bought their house just 6 months ago. "Mr. Richardson," the woman said, "I'm Jennifer Torres, and this is my husband Daniel. We wanted to thank you. We didn't know about the settlement or anything until we saw the email from the new board. Brenda had issued us 3 violation notices in our first month here. We were actually considering breaking our lease and moving. This was our dream house, but she made us feel like we'd made a terrible mistake. All 3 violations were dismissed in the review," Daniel added. "We can actually enjoy our home now, so thank you. We heard you're the one who stood up to her." "It was a team effort," I said, "and mostly my daughter. She's the real hero here." But as I looked around at the neighbors laughing and talking, free from the anxiety that had hung over the neighborhood for so long, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Real peace. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. I worked on my garden, had regular dinners with Wendy, and even joined a woodworking club that Tom Henderson had been trying to get me to check out for years. The neighborhood felt like a community again rather than a war zone. About 6 months after the settlement, I was pulling weeds from my garden when an unfamiliar car pulled up. A middle-aged man in a business suit got out and approached me. "Mr. Richardson, my name is David Park. I'm an attorney representing several HOA communities in the Phoenix metro area. I was hoping I could speak with you and your daughter." "About what?" "About your case against Brenda Patterson. Word has gotten around in legal circles about how you and your daughter handled it. I have 3 different HOA communities dealing with similar situations, board members abusing their authority and harassing homeowners. I'd like to consult with your daughter about the approach she took and possibly bring her in as co-counsel on these cases." I gave him Wendy's contact information, and sure enough, she called me that evening excited about the opportunity. Over the next year, Wendy ended up working on 5 different HOA harassment cases, winning 4 of them outright and settling the 5th favorably. She developed a reputation as the attorney to call when HOAs went rogue. "I think I've found my niche," she told me over dinner one night. "I never thought HOA law would be my passion, but there's something satisfying about helping people fight back against this kind of systemic bullying. Your mom always said you'd find your way to where you were meant to be." She was usually right about those things. As for Brenda, her house sold 3 months after she listed it. I never saw her again after that day in the conference room. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to Tucson, far enough away to start fresh. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, but I wasn't holding my breath. The HOA continued to function smoothly under new leadership. Violations were issued fairly and rarely. The neighborhood thrived. Property values actually went up, not because of draconian rule enforcement, but because people wanted to live in a community that felt like a community. I was reminded of something Sarah used to say. She'd always believed that the measure of a good neighborhood wasn't how perfect the lawns were or how uniform the mailboxes looked. It was how people treated each other, whether neighbors helped neighbors, whether there was kindness and grace. One afternoon, about a year after everything had settled, I was sitting on my porch when a moving truck pulled up to Brenda's old house. A young family piled out, kids running around excitedly, parents looking both exhausted and thrilled. They started unloading boxes, and I watched for a few minutes before grabbing a cooler full of cold drinks and walking over. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, offering them water and sports drinks. "I'm Henry Richardson. I live across the street." The father, a tall man with a warm smile, shook my hand. "Marcus Williams. This is my wife Natalie and our kids Emma and Lucas. Thanks for the drinks. Arizona heat is no joke. You'll get used to it. Listen, if you need anything, recommendations for services, help figuring out where anything is, just ask. That's what neighbors are for." "Actually," Natalie said, "the realtor mentioned something about the HOA. She said there were some issues in the past, but that everything's been sorted out." Long story, but yes. The HOA is solid now. They're fair, reasonable, and actually care about making this a good place to live. You'll be fine. We chatted for a few more minutes before I left them to their unpacking. As I walked back across the street, I saw Wendy's car pulling into my driveway. She'd been stopping by more often lately, sometimes with work questions, but more often just to have dinner and talk. "New neighbors?" she asked, nodding toward the Williams family. "Yep, nice folks. They've got young kids. Good. This neighborhood needs more young families, more life." She linked her arm through mine as we walked toward my front door. "Hey, Dad, I wanted to run something by you. I've been thinking about expanding my practice, maybe focusing exclusively on HOA and real estate law, start my own firm eventually. That's a big step, I know. But I feel like this is what I'm meant to do. These cases, helping people fight back against abusive HOAs, it matters, and I'm good at it. You're great at it. Your mom would be so proud, Wendy. I'm so proud. She squeezed my arm. Couldn't have done it without you standing your ground. You taught me that sometimes you have to fight, even when it's easier to just give in. We went inside, and she helped me make dinner while telling me about her latest case, another HOA president who thought he was above the rules. I listened, asked questions, and marveled at how something that had started as such a miserable experience had led to this, to Wendy finding her calling and to our neighborhood being genuinely better than it was before. That night, after Wendy left, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. The Williams kids were playing in their new front yard, their laughter carrying across the street. A few houses down, Tom and his wife were taking an evening walk. Linda Martinez was watering her garden, those drought-resistant native plants thriving under her care. My mailbox, still painted the exact same shade of gray it had always been, stood at the end of my driveway. My grass, kept at a reasonable length but never measured to the 1/10 of an inch, swayed slightly in the evening breeze. Everything was exactly as it should be, not because it conformed to some arbitrary standard of perfection, but because it was real and lived in and mine. I thought about all those weeks of stress and anger, the violation notices and threats, the lawsuit and countersuit. I thought about Brenda's red face as she'd screamed at me in my driveway, about the stack of evidence Wendy had compiled, about that moment in the conference room when we'd laid out everything and watched the realization dawn that she'd been caught. But more than that, I thought about the aftermath. The refunded fines, the changed policies, the neighbors who'd thanked me, the new HOA board that actually served the community, the young couple who'd been able to keep their dream home, Wendy finding her passion and her purpose. Sometimes standing up to bullies doesn't just protect you. Sometimes it changes everything for the better. Sometimes it creates ripples that spread far beyond what you can see in the moment. My phone buzzed with a text from Wendy. "Hey Dad, just got home. Thanks for dinner and the talk. Love you." I texted back, "Love you too, sweetheart. Proud of you." The sun finished setting, and I stayed on my porch a while longer, enjoying the peace. Real peace, the kind that comes not from avoiding conflict but from facing it and coming out the other side stronger. Tomorrow I'd work on my garden. Maybe I'd invite Tom over to help make a day of it. Maybe I'd take some vegetables over to the Williams family once they were settled. Life would continue, simple and good, in a neighborhood that had learned the hard way that rules without fairness are just tyranny, and that sometimes the only way to restore balance is to fight back. The lights came on in houses up and down the street, warm glows against the darkening sky. Desert Ridge Estates, a community that had nearly been torn apart by one person's abuse of power, had healed. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was ours and it was home. I finished my drink and stood up, ready to head inside. As I did, I took one last look at Brenda's old house, now the Williams house. New beginnings, I thought. For them, for the neighborhood, for all of us. The HOA saga had taught me something important. Power unchecked corrupts, but communities that stand together can reclaim what's theirs. Rules matter, but how they're enforced matters more. And sometimes, having a daughter who's an attorney doesn't hurt either. I laughed at that thought as I went inside and locked the door behind me. Life was good. The fight was over. Justice had been served. And tomorrow I wouldn't have to worry about measuring my grass or checking paint swatches or looking over my shoulder for clipboards and violation notices. Tomorrow, I could just be Henry Richardson, homeowner in a peaceful neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona. No threats, no lawsuits, no harassment, just life as it was meant to be lived, and honestly, that was the best victory of all.